Hi, it's yesterday at 12 o'clock. Welcome here. As you may or may not know, I am a fan of, a fandom that was dead for a while that has made, I don't know, maybe I could say a comeback. It's certainly in a very different status quo as of yesterday, which is very on brand for me. But I'm here and I'm obsessed and I'm having a good time living my life when I get a notification that the original creator of this franchise, this is the best word I can think of, commented on my video. So obviously I had to speedrun production and remake this intro and get this video out ASAP. So here we are. Today we're doing theories, 4, 5, and 6, I think. So yeah, let's just get into it, y'all. If you can't tell, I'm very, very excited. If you've ever had something that you've just been a huge fan of that maybe this is just me talking for just me, but I made my dad listen to me rant about all of my theories and all of my favorite concepts. I made both of my best friends let me basically recap 5 episodes of a podcast just so I could explain these concepts and these characters that I loved to them. I have gone on many a rant to many a person, and now I've been acknowledged, and that is one hell of a drug. Would recommend. I want to talk more about puzzles and deduction and their birth, though. Specifically, let's talk about their parents. For the longest time in the fandom, puzzles and deduction were known important characters who we just weren't told much of anything explicit about. And because of that, the majority of the fandom was very wrong about a lot of things about the two of them. Because, the individual people were missing details or had forgotten about things that we had been told or hinted at or, all this other stuff. But literally one of the last posts ever about this franchise was the creator addressing someone who thought deduction was a reincarnation of intelligence. And that is just very wrong. Here's the real tea. Theory number 4. Intelligence is puzzles and deduction's dad. And the crowd goes wild. I already offhandedly mentioned this a few minutes ago, and that's because, to be so completely honest, I feel like this one is obvious, and I know I'm probably wrong. It's not obvious. Other people just don't spend their entire afternoons analyzing and thinking about this content. But I did, so you can trust me when I say that intelligence is deduction and puzzles is dad. First things first, intelligence is not a previous incarnation of deduction, because as the creator said in the post about this, they look completely different, their eyes are different colors, and, they have all this without the room for possible exceptions that I talked about with Riddler. You're right, intelligence is connected to puzzles and deduction in some way, but they're not incarnations. Also, there have been a number of drawings of them together, which is not possible if one has to die for the other to exist. At least it's very, very, very rare that you find a way to meet your previous incarnation. I know it's possible, technically. I'm not sure how. We were told it happens at least once in the canon story, but not with who or how. Maybe something to do with death and her powers, but you certainly wouldn't be able to do that as commonly as deduction and intelligence have canonically interacted, at least in previous versions of the story. And I know sometimes people just draw in people together, but this is them having real, full, arguably canon interactions and stuff. The drawings just would have given a different vibe if they were incarnations and not just two people that exist. But there's also the stuff that I led with, but there's just no evidence of them being incarnations, is what I'm trying to say. But they are connected. Their names, and by extension their elements, are similar. They are intelligence and deduction. and also puzzles. But deduction is not synonymous with intelligence. Deduction is a product of intelligence. Are you following? At least in this case. I love, by the way, just to leave it here, just to say it, I love it when the characters' elements have some cool, interesting, thing to them, something to say or think about. I like it when the elements that everyone relates to correlates to their family tree. I think it's really fun. But generally, deduction and puzzles, how deduction and puzzles are twins, that's a cute, element thing. The really big thing is that intelligence, the character, is significant to the Overseer Society because he went rogue, which is really, really, really hard to do. He managed to get away without being killed, and that's something he's pretty much alone in, as far as I know. All the other rogues are dead. If that wasn't the case, all the gay people would have just left, all the trans people would have just left, Des specifically would have left immediately. That was, actually said in a video about them. The society sucks, so people just would leave if they could. Intelligence being a surviving rogue is very unique, to my understanding. And puzzles and deduction are explicitly the children of a rogue. That's, really important to their upbringing. Maybe they could be the kids of some other rogue who died. I guess technically we don't know that they weren't, and we don't know exactly how they got from being with their rogue parent to being, dropped off randomly in the Overseer's land. But there's more to it than that. You see, Knowledge, Intelligence's twin sister, is, really fond of puzzles and deduction for some reason. And even further, Muse, Intelligence and Knowledge's, best friend, childhood best friend, is the one who ends up adopting baby puzzles and deduction. Another huge piece of evidence, and honestly, the one that really brings this point home, is that they're second-gen overseers, meaning they are really powerful. There were only originally 11, I think, first-gen overseers, which, technically, I guess this is a mini-theory, because to my knowledge, we were never given a list of the first-gen overseers, but I think it's more a compilation of things we were told, because we know there were 11, and we know that the 11 first-gens made up the High Council. But anyway, to be a second-gen, you have to be the kid of at least one first-gen overseer. And of those, we've got Control, Death, Chaos, Space, Dreams, Fear or Charity, I think. I feel like it's one of the two, but I don't really know which. Earth, Water, Fire, Air, and Wisdom. Wisdom, who died and got split up into Intelligence and Knowledge, both being first-generation overseers. So, from such a limited pool of first-gens to draw from to have these twins, especially if they have to be the kids of a rogue, there's only one first-gen overseer who went rogue. And that person just so happens to have a matching element and vaguely similar design. I think it's really, safe to say that puzzles and deduction are Intelligence's children. But the more interesting question to me, honestly, is who is their mother? It's time to open the Pandora's box and talk about Addy. Okay, theory number 5. Not only is Intelligence, puzzles, and deduction's father, but addiction is their mother. This is one of my favorite theories because it makes so much sense to me, and I don't think it was ever confirmed because we don't know shit about addiction, but I think I do. I may be absolutely delusional thinking that this just wasn't a commonly known thing, but I don't think it was, and that's crazy to me. But because, for starters, let's talk about solid evidence. Let's talk about the sketchbooks. There was a comic with the My Beautiful Mother thing, where deduction compared puzzles to their mother, and we got a glimpse, a hard to see, but very present drawing of their mom, where she looks like this. There was also, in I think that same sketchbook, a drawing of Addy cradling deduction. There was a Heart Hard Head sketch, where there were doodles to and about that song that showed someone who looks like this, with, dyed hair ends, thinking about unhinged deduction, which took so many takes to actually say correctly. Unhinged deduction. Ugh. But all that isn't even mentioning all the content of Addy with intelligence, both, in old art and towards the end of the time that new content was being made. And to be fair, there's a lot of grains of salt that you have to take with some of these drawings, because the old sketchbooks are usually full of exploration and scrapped ideas or things that have changed a lot, but there's still an overwhelming amount of Addy, intelligence, puzzles, and deduction content if you have your eye out for it. And we are still just scratching the surface. I feel like this is a really cool idea, and I wish it had been a theory that was more around back when the fandom was booming, because I truly feel like even just that is really compelling evidence in context of what evidence the fans would normally get for any given thing. You have to know, sometimes it was literally FNAF levels of cryptic and retcons and dead ends. So I really think people, given the time, would have come to this conclusion. But I also know that Addiction was a very niche character to most people in the fandom. I don't even think, here's a big thing, I don't even think most people in the fandom realize that Addiction, Addy, and Adelaide were the same person. But let me just say this, I, over time, have eventually, gone through all the free content that we as the fans got and looked at it 100 different times, often with a magnifying glass or, with a fine-tooth comb, if you will, because I was so absolutely absorbed in these characters and their stories and wanting to know how it all fit together, and Addy very quickly became one of, if not my absolute favorite character. And I know I'm doing that thing that people do where I'm kind of doing two things. First off, I'd be a fool not to mention that there's the subconscious appeal of Addy over a character like Desponia or even Callie, because Addy is one that seems like a background character unless you have a lot of knowledge and you're a super fan. So I'm not like other girls. My favorite character isn't the main character, it's that one background character nobody cares or knows anything about. I don't think that's what I'm doing, especially because nowadays there's not really anyone to compare myself to, but also, I love Addy because she was really, really niche, and secretly she was extremely plot relevant, which is already cool. There's a lot more to her than it appears on the surface, both in a canon and a meta sense. There wasn't much disclosure, so knowing about Addy and figuring out how she fits into everything feels like a sort of direct result, and almost honestly a reward for having paced through the weeds to find the information about the story and about her. So having that makes me go, yes, Addy, I love her, she's really cool for a lot of reasons. And also, the other thing, I know there's a good chance that I'm kind of OC-ifying her, just because I like her so much, despite the lack of things to like about her, because we just don't know that much about her. There shouldn't be that much to like or dislike in general. And I'm sure she's done deplorable things in the actual canon of the story that I'm just not privy to. There's certainly probably a reason that Puzzles hates the idea of her so much. But hear me out, okay? Addy has such a compelling presence. Imagine a world where there's a society of people who are #not actual gods, where when they're born, their soul innately has a connection to some concept or something that gives them powers and stuff. And you've got dreams and flowers and charity, and then you're this is so cool, what do I get to be? And you get addiction. Think of the character, think of that person's story. Even most of the straight up evil characters in this society of gods aren't necessarily gods of bad things. Science and ambition are both people who do very evil things, but they're still accepted into the society. And they're still, one could argue or make the excuse, they're just doing what they're supposed to do. They're just so deep in their magic and their soul and their purpose that all of the things they do is actually fine in the end. It's all right that science did those experiments. He was just trying to advance science. And it's not. But people in canon could easily argue that. And that makes the overseers of universally negative elements and things so fascinating to me. Because just, you're told that you're magic and that your soul is predisposed to, fear or pain or addiction. From the moment you're born, you're looked down on as a harbinger of suffering. It's not like it's something you can change. It's your soul. And even if there is a way to magically change it, you think the king, whose name is Control, would like that? He's already transphobic. And then, if you don't lean into making the problems that people associate you with, to like doing your magic and validating everyone's hatred of you, you're shunned because you're not following the rules and you're breaking the mold that was made for you and you're not embracing the magical gift that you've been given. It's very compelling, and I love the, I guess, theoretical character work and plot of a character who has to go through that, because it's very compelling. I don't know if you've noticed, but certain peoples in modern society, and society in general, tends to judge people and look at them differently based on first impressions or assumptions or things that cannot be changed but still are perceived as innately wrong or negative. And Addy grows up in this god society, being an overseer of a negative element for however long, and then makes a break for it and runs away to 19th century Earth. And I wish I knew all the details of what she did and how she got there and all of this stuff. There's even more intrigue possible if all the stuff with the character Angst is still canon. There was this really niche character named Angst, where she was like the embodiment and the sort of head of all of these negative elements overseers, and she sparked like a whole war about the oppressive society of the overseers, and it was a whole thing. And I want to know more about her and Addy and Fear and all of the ones that are perceived as innately bad. But along with that, to be so for real right now, I think Addy would be nigh impossible to write, because how do you write about a character who's supposed to be the embodiment of addiction without hurting someone or implying something you don't mean to, or at the very least just framing things wrong? It's overall just very difficult because, of course, the big kicker, addiction, like a lot of things, is very different for everyone and is a very, very personal hardship. And by attempting to make a single character who's supposed to embody any and all experiences of it, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. And even if you go the other route of she embodies the general idea of it rather than embodying all of it, that kind of makes her too simplistic to be effective at being that character. And I think all of that is part of why we don't really know too much about Addy, along with just, the general spoilers attached to her. But it doesn't stop me from absolutely loving her, at least in concept. I find her incredibly cool, and I think especially because this is so niche, and especially because Addy doesn't have to be written as a representation of all experience necessarily, just as an outlet for, or, an expression of whoever's writing her at the time and their experiences, she could still be potentially written pretty well. But, I guess that would still be not to everyone's satisfaction. Love a philosophically controversial character, honestly. A sweet little guy. I could talk about her for so long, but all of this was supposed to be about puzzles and deduction still. So there's much evidence to discuss. I already brought up how often these characters, puzzles, deduction, Addy, and intelligence, are drawn together or in reference to each other, but also the timeline works out. Addy and intelligence are pictured in vaguely 19th century clothing multiple times, but even more damning, they're often pictured with Raven, who was confirmed to be the Aspian living in the 19th century, and she lives specifically from, quote, late 1800s to early 1900s. And we can safely assume, based on lots of different things, that during her adulthood, Adelaide and intelligence were officially together. And it just so happens that puzzles and deduction were born in 1889. So the timeline works out, and so do their designs, because in this world, usually, if someone is the kid of someone else, you will be able to tell very, very easily because of some design conventions. Kids in this world, when designed, often take very literally half of the features of their mother character and half of the features of their father character. And then when you find a trait where that's not the case, That's usually because it's just a very literal mix of their parents' traits. Like, for example, Passion. Passion has his dad's exact pale skin, his mom's exact blonde curly hair, and has purple eyes, which is not a trait either of his parents have, but it is the combo of the very true blue eye color of his dad and the very bright pink eye color of his mom. Boom, you get purple. So if we look at Deduction and Puzzles' physical characteristics, they have tan skin, very short elf ears, green eyes, and significantly, gray hair that ends in naturally growing green tips. And the parents I pose for them, Intelligence and Addiction, Intelligence has gray skin, big elf ears, gray hair, usually, and gray eyes. Addy has tan skin, human ears, green eyes, and blonde hair that naturally ends in green tips. And, yes, sometimes when depicted, she has black hair that ends in green tips, but the drawings of her with black hair are much older than the ones where she's depicted blonde. And either way, we've already really, hit the nail on the head with the coffin here when it comes to design correlation. All of their physical traits can easily be traced back to their parents if indeed Intelligence and Addy were their mom and their dad. Especially because if we're going into hair colors, there was a time when Intelligence and Knowledge's split from Wisdom caused Knowledge to have black hair and Intelligence to have white hair. And, shock of all shocks, during that period of Intelligence with white hair before it was retconned back to gray, Puzzles and Deduction were also depicted with white hair that ended in green tips. Before, again, it was retconned back to being gray at the same time. Which, I'm sure means nothing. And if we needed another extra little piece, we pretty much know that Puzzles dislikes her mom, and we also know that she intentionally hides the green tips at the end of her hair by keeping her hair in, this big bun all the time. Maybe, just maybe, that's because she got the green tips from her mom. Or at least, as a lady of the high court, doesn't want her appearance associated with the overseer of addiction, or with either of her rogue parents, so she just keeps it out of her face and keeps it tucked back as much as possible. Deduction and Puzzles are pretty much definitely Intelligence and Addy's kids. And now that we all agree on that, let's get to my favorite part of the whole fucking family, and that is their element stuff. If we want to get technical, there is explicitly no hard rule about any of these god people's magic having to be a mix of what their parents' element was. The closest thing to that being a hard rule is, these people called maintainers, but Addy is definitely not one of those. So from an in-world standpoint, their elements/magic types don't technically matter. They don't need to correlate to the people they're related to. But narratively, it's very cool, and it's a story, so often it is written where they do relate to make it cooler. So follow me. All of their elements, as shown in their names, make their relationship to each other just 10 times more interesting. And this is the part that sold the whole idea of the family for me, and made me love them so much, and understand why they were cool enough to have so much plot relevance. And this incorporates my next theory. Or theories. I actually don't know technically, so I guess we'll see. But long story short, once upon a time, there was a person named Wisdom. Wisdom had a sister named Opposite, the Overseer of Chaos. Already off to a great start. The mind and chaos being sort of two sides of the same coin. Already a really cool statement. Opposite had a love interest called Ambition. Also interesting. Not my favorite of these little, thematic pairings, but also it's the one with the most shaky canonicity, so it doesn't really matter. Ambition was a spaceman, and he brought all of the magic and the god people into his giant spaceship. Time passes, and eventually Opposite dies. Ambition later falls in love with a woman named Energy, who I'm pretty sure is Control and Death's daughter, so I think that's fun. Ambition needs energy, is made very literal. One cannot pursue their passions if they don't have the energy, so Ambition falls in love with Energy. And since I mentioned her, I can bring it up. Death, for complicated reasons, is also life, so life plus control equals energy is also fun. But anyway, Ambition falls in love with Energy, and here's my next big theory. I think we're on theory number 6. Ambition and Energy have a daughter. And that daughter is addiction. I love this theory because it makes a lot of sense. We've got the design thing, we've got plot relevance, and it's one of the few of these theories directly prompted by the creator. In a live stream, we were shown a picture of Ambition with his curly blonde hair, purple eyes, pale skin, and a picture of Energy with her long green hair, darker skin, and bright green eyes, and told to look really hard and think about it. And this is my answer to that. Addy is Ambition's daughter, which makes her even more my favorite character because it adds the whole my dad was evil and everyone thinks I'm evil too thing. And it adds more drama because Intelligence, who ends up being Addy's love interest, was friends with Ambition's reincarnation, who's named Obsession. But the whole, both of Addy's parents being, the two big baddies, at least in terms of broad-scale overseer shenanigans, Energy and Ambition caused the most problems for the overseers, and they're both Addy's parents, and that just, I'm so emo, I love that. Ugh. Anyway, so Ambition and Energy have Addy, and Wisdom also dies. Wisdom literally gets chopped in half. For some reason, it's unclear, but their magic crystal also gets cut in half, meaning that when they reincarnate, for some reason, they reincarnate into two people, Intelligence and Knowledge. And we've come back to another cool thematic statement. Wisdom's halves are Intelligence and Knowledge. I fucking love that. So, then, Wisdom is dead. Opposite is dead. Ambition is dead and reincarnates into Obsession. And so Intelligence and Obsession and Knowledge grow up together with their friend Muse. And then the big one, Intelligence, falls in love with Addiction. And I think that is very cool. It's very poetic. It's like how people talk about how the line between incredibly smart and insane is very thin. It gives the same energy. I just really like it. And they run away together. Intelligence and Addiction run from control, which is also fun. And they have twins, Puzzles and Deduction, which, let me say that again for those in the back. Intelligence plus Addiction equals Puzzles and Deduction. Are we seeing how fun this is? That's great. And the two new twins are raised by Muse. We learned that in a video. Us being told that Muse raises them actually deconfirmed my original crack theory, which had a lot less evidence, which was that Energy and Ambition had a kid, and that kid was Muse. But, timeline-wise, that wouldn't make any sense. And either way, as you can clearly tell based on my ranting, Addy is a lot more fun, and design-wise makes a lot more sense, and is more poetic. So that's the theory I'm going with. But yeah, isn't that a fucking cool family tree? Addiction is Ambition's daughter, and Puzzles and Deduction are the twin children of Addiction and Intelligence. Very, very poetry. Very cool. It also leans into the, Ambition haunts the narrative thing. He's everywhere, even though most of his actual time alive is long before the main characters are born. He's in Infinity Story, he interacts with the first three Aspians, he brings the Overseers together, he's besties with Pippa, he becomes a murderer, just the past of the story is just painted over in a wide brush with Ambition. And then again with Obsession, who's important to Intelligence's backstory, and the way the Overseers operate, and Deduction, and Milas, who died during the war, and Science, which by extension makes him, secretly important to Lucid and Dawn, and probably Desponia. This soul, the Overseer of Passion, is literally all over the place. It's very cool. All of these sort of disparate, separate elements of the story were all sewn together using one character throughout time, and I'm obsessed with it, which is funny because it's Obsession. Also, now that I have all that out of the way, no one can tell me Addy is a background character, because speaking of weaving things together, Intelligence, Knowledge, Puzzles, Deduction, and Obsession were very literally listed as the characters important to the world. In the video that it was supposed to be the intro video to the whole franchise, there was the list of some of the main characters of different stories, there was the trouble suit and whatever, but then towards the end, there was literally a list that was these are the important characters, and it was Intelligence, Knowledge, Puzzles, Deduction, and Obsession, and the thing that connects all of those characters is Addy. And I guess Intelligence, but he doesn't really count because he's one of the people on the list. So that summary video has a really cool direct example of how Addy is secretly a very important character who ties a lot of things together. I love Addy so much. God. Both of her parents are the villains. It makes me so fucking emo. It makes me so... By the way, everyone should go listen to The Arsonist by Halsey and try to tell me that that's not an Addy-coded song. She was specifically headcanoned to be voiced by Halsey. That was like the dream scenario. Go listen to that song and come back and I'll shut up about Addy because you'll understand why I'm obsessed with her. Like, the vibes are immaculate. Okay, but it's obsession time. I want to talk more about him. And that's where I think we'll close out this time. We can get into ambition stuff in the next part because, damn, I just talk and talk, don't I? I love it, honestly. Come on, keep going. Thank you for watching. I know I got a little bit excited about Addy there, but hey, you can't blame me. She's awesome. In theory. I'm not going to rant again, but if you got this far, you probably know way more than you thought you would, or than is necessary about how much I love this extremely obscure character from this very dead piece of media. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you had a good day yesterday, and I hope to see you in part 3. Remember to drink water. Bye.